On Monday, the 27th of March 2023, America had its 139th school shooting just this year. Police started to receive calls at 10:13 a.m. to say there was an active shooter at the Nashville Covenant School. That shooter was 28-year-old Audrey Hale. Audrey had gained access into the school by shooting her way through some glass doors, first killing Mike Hill. She then roamed the halls with her guns looking for more victims. The other 5 victims were head teacher Catherine Kuntz, supply teacher Cynthia Peake, and 9-year-olds Evelyn, William and Hallie. Police responded incredibly quickly and they've been hailed as heroes for it taking only 4 minutes for them entering the building to finding the shooter. I just find it absolutely horrific that this is the 139th school shooting in just 3 months in the USA. And my thoughts obviously go out to all the victims and their families.
Blood-curdling facts that you wish you never knew. Part 23. In 2008, 3 Texas teenagers were arrested after they dug up a skeleton and used the skull as a bong. The police later found that the skull belonged to an 11-year-old boy. While uncommon, there have been many cases of people's intestines being sucked out by vacuum toilets on airplanes. So if you want to keep your rectum, be sure to stand up before you flush. Every single fig has had at least one wasp die inside of it. Nosebleeds can bleed out of your eye sockets. And it's possible to be allergic to your own blood. There's a rare phenomenon called a stone baby where a fetus dies and doesn't get absorbed by the body. And people have been known to carry these fetuses for up to 40 years, completely unaware. There's a shack in Louisiana called the Devil's Toy Box where people supposedly lose their minds after spending any amount of time there. When this story's over, you're gonna remember 3 words. A college student went backpacking alone for a few weeks in the Austrian mountains. He was in the middle of the wilderness with no human in sight for miles. Over the course of nearly 3 weeks, he saw only one other person paddling along in a canoe across the water. About halfway through the trip, the boy was very low on supplies. His phone was almost dead, he was out of food, and he only had 1 plastic water bottle left. He dug through his bag and luckily found a disposable camera, so he was able to capture a few pictures along the way. When he returned home, he got the pictures developed and began to look through them. He sorted through about 15 or so nature shots until he came across a picture that stood out to him. It was a photo of the boy sleeping on his stomach. He was shirtless and his back was covered in blood. He immediately took off his shirt to discover his back was scarred with 3 words etched on his skin. And if you want to know what the 3 words were, go to Liquid Death's page to find out.
This is Jane. She used to be a neighbour of the infamous Jeff the Killer prior to him losing his mind. Once he started murdering people, Jane's parents soon fell victim to the maniacal Jeff the Killer. Jane herself was also attacked by Jeff, and he left her for dead after setting her on fire, but she managed to survive. She was in hospital for 2 weeks before she finally woke up. The attack had ironically left Jane with bleached white skin, which is reminiscent of Jeff's appearance. She then received a package with a taunting note attached. It was from Jeff. The package contained a white mask with black layers covering the eye holes. Jane swore revenge on Jeff and vowed to kill him. One day, at another of Jeff's crime scenes, police found a note. Confused as it was addressed to Jeff rather than being from him, the letter revealed there was another killer out there. They were killing people not because they hated them, but because they imagined them to be Jeff. The final words read, "I'm coming for you, sleep well." Signed, Jane the Killer. This is the Rake. It's a quadruped humanoid creature, which is said to attack and scare humans for reasons not known. The Rake has been described as both a 6-foot human who walks on all 4s with pale skin, and a hairless dog. It gets its name from its long claws on its hands, which resemble that of a garden rake. The earliest known mention of the Rake is in a mariner's log dated 1691. In it, the mariner explains how he and his crew had recently landed in the New World, and the Rake forced them to leave. It also allegedly took everything from them and their ship. A famous Spanish journal entry from 1880 also mentions the Rake. It's described as having hollow black eyes, which cause great psychological trauma and terror. More modern sightings say they woke up in the early hours to see the Rake staring at them, before crawling away. It typically just stares at you, but will stand up and attack you if provoked. The key thing to do if you see the Rake is to not touch it, and if possible, don't show any fear. Do that and you might just survive the night.
Welcome to another installation of Killers That Got Caught Because They're Idiots. Today we're talking about the guy that tried to kidnap a barista in Washington on Monday. And while he's not a killer and it's unclear if that was his intention, he's still an idiot, so he's on the list. In this video, you can see here where Matthew Darnell tried to kidnap a barista by pulling her through the small drive-through window. It's unclear why he thought that would work, but thank God it was his plan because the barista was basically uninjured in the whole ordeal. Let's now take a look at this large and identifiable tattoo that says Chevrolet in cursive that ultimately helped the police identify Matthew. I'm not here to tattoo shame anyone, but maybe don't commit a crime where the only two parts of you caught on security footage are your face and a hyper-specific tattoo that is unique to you. Also, as he's leaving, he stops here, and I don't know if that's to collect the $5 in loose change that she dropped. But as he's leaving, we get a really great glimpse of the back of his truck and his license plate, which also helped the police identify him. Matthew is currently being held on a $500,000 bail, but let's hope he never gets out.
This is the worrying disappearance of a girl who disappeared after her sister's graduation party. Jasmine Smith was 22 years old, living in Warren. On the 5th of June 2015, she travelled to Farrell in Pennsylvania to celebrate her sister's high school graduation. The trip was only around half an hour long, so her family were actually happy to wave her off after the event, knowing it wouldn't take long for her to get home. However, then 3 whole weeks would go by without them being able to get in contact with Jasmine. They reported the young woman missing to police, who disturbingly would hear news not long after of another girl, Alicia Bell, going missing. If you've not seen my video on the disappearance of Alicia, check it out, I've just posted it before this one. Essentially, Alicia, pictured above, went missing from the same area. Her remains were later found in a burn pit on the property of James Brooks. He was convicted of her murder. Jasmine's family fear that she may have become prey to this killer too. At the time of her disappearance, Jasmine was 5'7" and weighed 145 pounds. She's got several distinguishable tattoos, a heart and arrow near the corner of her eye on her upper cheek, and the word Bubby inside of a heart on her upper arm. Anyone with any information is urged to call police.
You have to see this video. Reddit user whomisYou claims that they received a phone call from their dead mother. He says that he's 15 and that this all happened about 9 months ago, when his mother died from cancer. After his mother's death, he moved in with his uncle. About 2 months later, on September 22nd, he had his name day, which is a tradition in Latvian culture. He said he woke up to a call and he answered it. On the call, he heard his mother's voice talking to him. She was asking questions like, "How are you?" and "Is everything okay?" After the questions and talking with her, he suddenly got a knock on the door. It was his uncle's girlfriend who walked in and said, "Wake up, it's time for school." She then walked out of the room. He says that it was at this moment that he got up and decided to look at his phone. And when he checked his call history, his mother's number wasn't on it. Later that day, he asked his uncle's girlfriend if she had heard him talking on the phone earlier that morning. She said no. So what do you guys think? Was this just some strange, vivid dream? Could he have really been talking to his mother's ghost? Or was this some sort of entity that was posing as his mother?
You guys heard of the haunted house that requires you to sign a 40-page waiver? The McCamey Manor that's located in Somerville, Tennessee is described to be like a torture chamber. But before even stepping into this haunted house, you would need to complete a phone screen, a background check, and sign a 40-page waiver. And then if all that's approved, you'd have to watch a 2-hour video of every person who has attempted to complete the haunted house in the past 2 years. So what exactly makes this haunted house so scary? Well, not only can this experience last up to 10 hours of physical and mental torture, but it's been said that people are waterboarded, forced to eat nasty things, and duct taped. This waiver even states that participants must be okay with workers torturing them however they see fit. Some people claim that they were forced to take a pill that caused them to hallucinate. And apparently it's so bad that they had to seek professional help after they went through the experience. But Russ, who's a founder, says that participants are not being tortured. Rather, they're being put under hypnosis, making them believe that something scary is happening when in reality it's not. What's interesting about this challenge is that participants can win $20,000 if they can withstand the experience, but there has not been a winner so far. What's crazy is that people have petitioned to try and shut down this attraction because of how traumatic it is, but it's still operating till this day. Comment below if you'd participate in this haunted house.
Have you ever wondered how accurate police sketches are? I'm going to show you some sketches, then I'm going to show you the person that was caught, and we're going to see. And I cover all things spooky on this channel, so make sure you follow along. So this photo right here is a police sketch of the original Night Stalker, also known as the Golden State Killer. The Golden State Killer is known for terrorizing California in the 70s and 80s. So it took a really long time for them to be able to catch the Golden State Killer. And part of the reason is they thought that he was two different killers at first. They thought it was one person who was responsible for a bunch of SAs that were happening in Northern California, and then a separate person that years later was responsible for taking people's lives. But DNA evidence proved that it was one man, and these are some sketches of him. One thing that really stands out to me is this like all-American kind of boy next door look that he almost has. In 2018, DNA evidence proved that it was Joseph D'Angelo who was the Golden State Killer, but let's look at some pictures of him when he was younger. The other photos to me don't look as similar, but this is spot on to me. There's so many little details in this photo that are correct, from the swoopy hair to the chubby cheeks and the thin lips. Like even the ears look identical. And you'll notice here that he is in a cop uniform because he was a cop, which is something that they figured because of the nature of his crimes. One thing that he would do to victims was he would wake them up by shining a flashlight into their eyes, which is something that the police would use to disorient people that they were arresting. Ultimately, it was DNA evidence from a genealogical database that put him away, but I'm a little bit surprised they didn't catch him based on the sketch because it looks so similar to me.
This case is one of those cases that have you questioning humanity. Alex Murdaugh was a successful and well-known lawyer in South Carolina who murdered his wife and 22-year-old son on June 7th, 2021. He shot them both at close range in their 1,700-acre estate home and then called 911 and said that he found them like that when he arrived. Investigators believe that his motive was to conceal financial corruption that he had caused for so many years. You see, Alex wasn't such a great guy. He was stealing from his law partners and clients to fund his addiction and lavish lifestyle. Alex embezzled millions of dollars and had been doing this since 2015. And get this, one of the clients that he actually stole from was the family of his housekeeper who mysteriously passed away in his home after working for them for 20 years. Prosecutors believe that he murdered his wife and son to gain sympathy from others in the community so that people would forget about everything he did in the past. The Murdaugh family comes from a lot of money and status, and people really knew who they were because this wealthy family has been around for decades. Now, some people still believe that Alex is innocent because of how emotional he was, but it only took the jury 45 minutes to find him guilty. After Alex murdered his son and wife, so many secrets were exposed from people closest to the Murdaugh family. And it's alleged that Alex was involved in concealing a few other murders as well. There's now even a Netflix series called Murdaugh Murders and Southern Scandal, and it dives deep into everything.
Jumped off a bridge because I couldn't stand living any longer. Bruh. My name is Etika, a famous YouTuber, and let me tell you my sad story. I was born on May 12, 1990 in New York City. Since a young age, I loved playing games on the computer, and in 2007 I began sharing that on YouTube. I started the channel called Etika World Network, and after some time I began to gain some popularity. I became known for my highly energetic reactions to Super Smash Bros. Character reveals and Nintendo Direct presentations, and for playing and reacting to various games. This caused me to go viral, and quickly, I became a big internet sensation. However, between 2018 and 2019, I began to struggle with my mental health. I threatened to commit suicide on multiple occasions, and I was being hospitalized several times. Online, I received hate from various people, which was also not easy to endure. My mental state didn't improve, unfortunately. On June 19, 2019, I tragically decided to take my own life by jumping off the Manhattan Bridge. The world had lost a beautiful soul and a young man who brought a smile to the faces of his millions of viewers daily. Share in the comments how you discovered his channel or your favorite memory to pay tribute to him. May Etika rest in peace.
Teenager sent a disturbing text to her mum before going missing. What happened next is horrifying. Alicia Bell was just 18 years old when she left her mum's house to go to her relatives in Ohio. It was the 23rd of July, 2015. However, shortly after leaving the house, Alicia sent her mum a frantic text message. It said, "Mum, if I make it home, I need you, I'm scared." Understandably panicked, her mum then desperately tried to call her daughter. She called over and over, but worryingly the calls kept going to voicemail. Alicia never arrived at her relative's house and was never seen alive again. Alicia was reported missing and police got to work trying to figure out what had happened. However, initially they had no luck. That was until August when they raided the home of 40-year-old James Brooks. Initially, this was unrelated. They were actually raiding his home to try and find substances. It was at this point that they found a lot more than they bargained for. Horrifically, James had human remains in his garden in the burn pit. Police were suspicious that this may be the missing teenager. James actually knew her family, and incorrectly they thought he was harmless. He was arrested and charged with abuse of a corpse amongst many other unrelated charges. Forensics tragically confirmed the remains were that of Alicia. In May 2016, James was facing numerous charges relating to manslaughter, trafficking, abduction, and substance charges. Prosecutors believed that James was trafficking multiple girls, including Alicia, but the trafficking charges were for some reason dropped. He eventually pleaded guilty to all charges relating to Alicia's death. He was given 30 years in prison. Now, James is interestingly a person of interest in the disappearance of another missing girl. This is a girl from the same area called Jasmine Smith. She actually went missing a month before Alicia. Let me know if you'd like me to cover Jasmine's disappearance.
I'm not even sure where to start with this one. This is a story of 3-year-old Sutton Mosser. It's pretty graphic, so viewer discretion is advised. Sutton lived with her mother Justine, her grandparents and her 2 uncles in Michigan and was the absolute centre of everybody's world. On September 14th, 2021, Sutton turned 3. 2 days later, her life ended in the most brutal way. Sutton had been left at home in her mother's care, somewhere she should have been perfectly safe. On September 16th, around 10 p.m, Sutton's uncle arrived home to an empty house. He didn't look for his sister or niece, but when his brother arrived home a few hours later and asked where they were, they decided to go and see if they were in the back room. What they found in that back room they could not have prepared themselves for. They saw a garbage bag with a foot sticking out. They decided to call their uncle, who arrived at the house, and then called the emergency services. Police and paramedics arrived and found 3-year-old Sutton wrapped in a comforter and stuffed inside a bin bag. She had stab wounds to her neck, chest, and a gaping wound in her abdomen, exposing her intestines. She'd been stabbed a total of 17 times. There was a blood-stained pair of jeans in the bag with her, and bloody handprints on the bag and walls, as well as 3 knives recovered from the bedroom. One of the bloody handprints on the wall was found to be Sutton's. The rest were those of her mother Justine. Police located Justine at 8:30 a.m. on September 17th, walking along railroad tracks. She showed absolutely no emotion when the police told her that her daughter was dead, and she was arrested. Justine told police that she'd been having hallucinations, and it was cartoon character SpongeBob SquarePants that had told her to murder her daughter, or she'd be killed instead. She said she'd been abusing heroin and meth and was having withdrawal symptoms, causing hallucinations. She couldn't remember her daughter being left alone with her, or a single detail about murdering her. She had, however, had the mental capacity to change into clean clothes after murdering her daughter. She pleaded guilty to first-degree felony murder and first-degree child abuse, saying that if it was her that killed her daughter, she deserved to be punished. She was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole, plus 50 years for the child abuse charge. She'll spend the rest of her life in prison.
Did you know that there's an alien buried in the state of Texas? And yes, I'm talking about the corpse of an extraterrestrial being. So this is the Aurora Cemetery in Aurora, Texas. It's in North Texas. And yes, inside of the cemetery, there is a grave that belongs to a supposedly extraterrestrial being. So this alien plane crash actually happened supposedly in 1897. On April 17th of that year, an alien UFO supposedly crashed into a windmill and crash landed on the property of local judge J.S. Proctor. This is actually what the crash site looks like today. I love how they've kind of gone with the theme. But everybody who came to look at the remains of this alien ship noticed that the person inside of it that was piloting it was not of this world. They even called it in the original news report a Martian. So what's interesting is that the town allegedly got together and decided that this alien deserved a Christian burial. So they brought it to the Aurora Cemetery and buried the alien in a Christian ceremony. Here's what the gravesite used to look like. It's got a little UFO on the side of it. So, allegedly, the wreckage from the crash was dumped into a nearby well, which was underneath the windmill that was damaged, and the rest of the wreckage was actually buried with this alien's body. So, in 1935, another man bought the crash site property from Judge J.S. Proctor, and he cleaned out the well, got rid of all the wreckage, but he claims that after drinking the water that was in the well, he developed a severe case of arthritis, and thus he covered the well up with a concrete slab and sealed it permanently. So this is where the grave is marked today. I actually visited this cemetery a few years ago, and it's really strange to think that an alien might be buried here. So various alien researchers have visited the cemetery and they've came to some pretty shocking conclusions. So at one point, people tried to deny the story and say that it was a hoax and that a windmill never existed on the original property. But a television crew actually found the remains of an old windmill there. And the guy who actually owns the land allowed a TV crew to unseal the well. They found a large amount of aluminum in the well, and the landowner actually gave them pieces of the wreckage. When they analyzed it, they found that the wreckage was made of aluminum and another unknown element. They couldn't figure out what it was made out of. And then we get to the grave, and this is crazy. So people have repeatedly asked the city for permission to dig up this unmarked grave. But the cemetery actually denies people that request every single time. I don't know why they're denying this request, if they just want to keep the mystery alive or what, but nobody knows what's buried there. And interestingly enough, another TV crew came out and did ground-penetrating radar, and they did detect an anomaly, which meant that there is more than likely a chance that there is a body under there. But because it was so badly deteriorated, they couldn't get good readings, and they don't know what the remains belong to. So yeah, I would love for somebody to finally figure out this mystery, because it's something that keeps me awake at night. But if you ever want to visit it, you can go to the Aurora Cemetery, and they actually have a plaque that tells the story of the alien that's buried there.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
Welcome back to our YouTube channel. After murdering, day 3 after murdering somebody.
Wow! Don't put that on the camera.
It was worth it.
And we had sex a lot.
The full video and transcript of the video that I just showed you is incredibly disturbing. Yes, you heard what they said correctly. This 18-year-old named Aaron Guerrero said murdering somebody was worth it. But who did this teenage couple just murder together? Well, it was none other than 16-year-old Sierra Halseth's father, Daniel Halseth. So at the time, Sierra was living with her father, Daniel. Daniel seemed like your everyday father. He prioritized fitness, he posted frequently on social media, and his posts frequently involved his family, including his 16-year-old daughter, Sierra. Now, before the murder happened, Sierra's parents, Daniel and Elizabeth, had gone through a bitter divorce. In October of 2011, Daniel was assaulted for open and gross lewdness after his wife said he assaulted her. Then there were allegations that Elizabeth had been cheating on Daniel, and obviously they just had a terrible marriage. But at some point along the way, 16-year-old Sierra crossed paths with 18-year-old Aaron Guerrero, and the young couple quickly fell in love. So at some point, Sierra told Aaron that her father, Daniel, was abusive towards her, both physically and sexually. And according to the two of them, they felt like the only way to make this right was to murder Sierra's blood father. So in April of 2021, the two came up with a plan. I should also add in here that Aaron and Sierra had dated in 2020 before both of their parents had separated them and said they were bad for each other. They had also learned that the two were planning on running off to Los Angeles together, and since Sierra was only 16 at the time, obviously her dad said no. So the day before Daniel's body was found, Aaron ran away from home and disappeared. And the two teenagers then purchased a circular saw, saw blades, bleach, lighter fluid, disposable gloves, and a drop cloth from a local hardware store. Now, Aaron claims that he carried out this murder because he was on LSD at the time of the murder, but I've never seen that actually proven. So on that day in April of 2021, Sierra and Aaron entered the Halseth home. They then stabbed Daniel Halseth 70 times. They cut his body up, they set fire to it, and they attempted to burn down his house. And at one point shortly afterwards, a woman named Peggy and her friend entered Daniel's home and noticed that his front door was open. They then smelled smoke and noticed a large burned patch on the living room floor. Afterwards, they entered the garage and noticed the smell of lighter fluid. They also saw a sleeping bag on the floor, and when they opened up the sleeping bag, they saw the charred and mutilated remains of Daniel Halseth. So Sierra and Aaron then stole Daniel's car and went on the run, and they were eventually arrested in Salt Lake City, Utah, just a few days after killing Sierra's dad. And it was 3 days after the murder when they made that disturbing video where they giggle and laugh about murdering Daniel. So eventually, after a lengthy trial and all these details became public, Sierra and Aaron were sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 22 years. So they are in prison now, and I think that video remains one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen. The complete lack of empathy and the almost cheeriness, happiness that they both have within them, even after murdering Sierra's father.
This is the disturbing case of the child who killed a child. In July 2018, 6-year-old Alicia McPhail was abducted from her bed. She'd been staying with her grandparents in the Isle of Bute. She'd gone to sleep watching Peppa Pig, and no one had any idea of the horrors that would unfold that evening. Meanwhile, 16-year-old Aaron Campbell was drinking with friends at his house. Aaron apparently became upset in the night because he had been arguing with his mum. He had had a challenging upbringing involving physical and emotional abuse. Aaron decided that evening he wanted to get some substances to smoke from a couple that he knew. The couple in question were Alicia's dad, Robert, and his girlfriend. They'd been known to sell substances to Aaron previously, but he could not get hold of them. Intending to go and steal them off them, Aaron armed himself with a knife. He headed to Robert's house where he lived with his parents and girlfriend. This was obviously where Alicia was staying that evening. When he arrived at the house, he noticed the 6-year-old sleeping in her bed and took the opportunity to snatch the poor defenseless young child. Disgustingly, he carried her to a secluded location, SA'd her, and then killed her. He then disposed of his clothes in the sea. At 6 a.m. the next day, Alicia's grandparents woke up to discover that the little girl was missing. They straight away alerted police and locals. When the family asked Aaron to keep an eye out for the little girl, he texted them back saying, "Oh damn, I'm sure she's not went too far." A local man soon discovered Alicia's lifeless body around 15 minutes away from her house. Along with a lot of the local community, Aaron's mum actually checked her CCTV of her house. She was hoping that this would help with the investigation, and it definitely did. She saw her son leaving and returning from the house that night, and she handed the evidence over to police. Aaron was arrested, and it was discovered that the clothes that he'd abandoned on the beach did actually match with his DNA. This case made me terrified to go to the cinema. This is the case of the horror in Screen 9. James Holmes was raised in California. His mum was a nurse and his dad was a scientist. From a young age, he was experiencing night terrors and allegedly actually tried to take his own life when he was just 11 years old. He was apparently obsessed with guns and weapons and had dreamed of becoming a mass murderer. Between May and July 2012, he legally bought 4 guns. Background checks were conducted and he was allowed the weapons. He also bought spike strips, which, if you don't know, pop the tyres of cars if they chase after you. On July the 19th, just hours before tragedy would unfold, James mailed his notebook to his psychiatrist. Inside the notebook, James detailed his plans to kill. The notebook was actually discovered later on undelivered. Just prior to entering a cinema in Aurora, James rang a crisis line to tell them about his plans to kill. However, the call was disconnected after just 9 seconds. At the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises, CCTV captures James walking into the cinema. He walks into Screen 9, props open the door, and then walks back out again. Shockingly, he goes to his car and gets guns out and gas canisters. He re-entered the screen at about 12:38 p.m. and set off 2 gas canisters. When he entered Screen 9 again, he immediately opens fire on the audience, instantly killing 10 people. 2 others later died in hospital from their injuries. An additional 70 people were injured. This was an absolutely packed out cinema. James also shot at people as they scrambled to exit the screen. His youngest victim was a 6-year-old girl. Witnesses said this all unfolded as there was actually a gunfight on the screen, and initially they all thought it was special effects and just part of the film. Police were actually on the scene very quickly after the first 911 call. James surrendered to the police and was arrested in the car park. He was apparently very calm when he was arrested and told police that he had booby-trapped his apartment. When police investigated his apartment, this was found out to be true. He was sentenced to 12 consecutive life sentences.